What's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. Almost 2026 here. We're gonna be keeping the ball rolling with some of these year in review type videos. For this video here, we're gonna be doing a recap on the best 7-day login champions of all time. So we're going to be listing all the 7-day login champions that we are aware of, and then we're going to put them into a tier list, and then we're going to be ranking each and every one of them. Now keep in mind, any kind of tier list and ranking system is going to be flawed, quite frankly quite difficult to do, but I'm going to try my best to view each champion in a holistic type of way, trying to be objective in their abilities, at the same time offering my own experience with the champion, and then giving them a overall rating. Alright guys, so here is the list here. I'm going to put it right above my head in this format here. You guys can have a quick look. We have 16 7-day login champions here. Obviously, these are the time-limited ones. These aren't the ones that are going to be in the game. For example, if you start the game with no code or anything like that, or any kind of promo that's happening, you're going to get the 7-day shaman that's going to be when you start the game. So these ones are a little bit more exclusive. Obviously, some of them are not going to be available in the game anymore. I have them ordered here chronologically. Whenever the first one started, first we'll be starting with Ninja, and then the last one will be Xenomorph. I believe that's roughly about the correct chronological order, and that's the order in which we're going to be ranking them. So S tier is going to be a superior, like, overall champion, can be used in many areas, or they are extremely good in a certain area to the point where you're basically going to be using them all the way from the early game all the way to the end game. A tier is similar to S tier, but maybe a little bit worse in some areas, or maybe they're a bit more limited in some aspect, but still very, very good champions. B tier, I would say closer to like average champions, still good, still probably usable in a lot of different areas, a lot of different stages of your account, but not necessarily going to fit into everybody's account. C tier, now we're talking about slightly below average champions. You might find use, might be vault champions, but not necessarily super, super great. And then D tier will be the vault champions, very rarely going to escape the vault. All right, guys, so with that all being said, let's jump into the first champion here. So we got Ninja. Ninja is the only champion on this list that actually showed up twice. He showed up twice. I think it was a purely contractual thing. So he showed up in 2021, sometime in the summertime, July, I would say. And he showed up again 3 years later, exactly 3 years on the day. So in 2024, in July, on the day that he was first released in 2021, he showed up again. So clearly some kind of contractual obligation or contractual limitation that was happening. But they were, able to bring Ninja back, which is absolutely amazing because Ninja is insane. He's awesome. Even to this day in 2025, almost 2026, he has damage dealing stats here. He has actually decent HP for a damage dealer. He's got boosted crit damage with a little bit of accuracy. His A1 brings decreased defense as well as a little bit of a turn meter bump. A2, his big hit here is triple hit HP burn with the activations. Deals lots of damage against single target bosses. And then he has an AoE slapping freeze here. It's on 4-turn cooldown, so not the best, but still pretty strong attack here. And his passive will boost his attack over time as well as his crit damage. And he performs extremely well against bosses with his passive. So for Ninja, Ninja's still super relevant in today's meta. Paired up with Mikage. So this is a strength of him being in the Shadowkin faction and Mikage being so good, and she is obviously attainable in-game as well. But together they do a ton of damage, especially against Hydra, especially against Chimera and the clan boss. Ninja has been very good. When Ninja was first released, he absolutely fit into so many clan boss teams and made clan boss damage a lot more easier to get. This is 2021, by the way. And the fact that this champion still does very good against those bosses and new bosses just shows that his kit is absolutely insane. So he is without a doubt going to be in the S tier. Just his overall impact in the game, the overall impact for your account. If you ever pick him up, he's absolutely amazing. And we are lucky to have him. All right, so after Ninja, it's actually going to be Alexander. So Alexander, the sharpshooter here from the High Elves faction. I had to just double check this, but Alexander came out before Deliana. So Alexander came out in December, about 6 months later after Ninja. So in late 2021, Alexander came out, and he's based off of, I believe, a professional CSGO player. That's why he, I guess, is a sharpshooter, I guess, which is pretty interesting, right? Anyways, his base stats here, a little bit on the weak side, to be honest, especially if he's going to be a damage dealer. 1432 is quite weak. Checking out his kit here, he's got an A1 freeze, he's got an A2 AoE decreased defense, which is pretty weak, and then he has a chance to land weaken. on certain tribes. And then he has an A3 single target hit with the strip and a accuracy in all battles. Generally, he's considered quite weak. He has a kind of like an epic level kit. Even at the time when he was released, he was not particularly strong. He doesn't deal enough damage. His upside, like conditional debuffs and all that, and conditional abilities are just not very good. And for some reason, he has some hate for the orcs and Ogren tribes. So unfortunately, Alexander is a little bit of a meme champion. He's not going to be super useful. I mean, he does bring decreased defense for the high elves, but honestly, he's probably not going to be super useful other than a collector item. Up next, we do have another high elf, and that's going to be Deliana. Now, Deliana, I think, is slightly better than Alexander because she actually brings some things that are pretty unique for her time. She has an AoE A1, which is, I think, a little bit more unique than it was now. Nowadays, it's like, oh, it's kind of standard-ish. But an AoE A1 with a Leech debuff. Leech was not particularly common debuff as well, which is very good for starting players, especially against clan boss or bosses in general. And then her A2 is a single target hit with decreased resistance. Decreased resistance is something that was not common at all. And then she has a conditional spread only on the decreased resistance if it's under block buffs. Now, this is not something that's very good. It's not a very good conditional effect. It's on a 3-turn cooldown as well. And she's not a hard-hitting champion. So this ability generally is pretty bad. But she also brings this AoE block buffs against enemies here, which is very uncommon, like I said, and it's actually pretty decent. Other than the fact that it's on a 4-turn cooldown, it is definitely still usable in today's day and age, even against Hydra, or at least early game Hydra. A 4-turn cooldown AoE block buff still can be useful. A little bit of a heal and a little bit of a turn meter as well. Unfortunately, yeah, like I said, on a 4-turn cooldown doesn't make it great, but it's still okay. Her passive makes building her out a little bit easier. Her accuracy goes up for every 1000 HP she has, so it makes it a little bit easier to build her out. And then she helps your team out by adding a little bit of strength in. Obviously, you know, she's going to be a decent-ish usable early game champion, but outside of that, she's not going to see too much use. 4-turn cooldown AoE block buffs could be useful, but that's only if you're super, super desperate. Clearance been adding more and more block buff champions into the game as well. So I'm going to see her fall off a little bit. But honestly, I see her being somewhat useful, especially for me personally. I think I've used her in some Centranos waves. She's not bad in a stun set since she does land 2 AoEs, and an AoE A1 is actually quite okay. And she does have, you know, a little bit of protection for your team as well. So not too bad. A little bit more useful than Alexander. I'm going to put her in the below average tier. All right, so moving on to our next champion on the chronological scale here, we have Ultimate Death Knight. Ultimate Death Knight here from the Undead Hordes. And this guy, I'm pretty sure this guy was a game changer when he was first introduced into this game. His passive is what makes him super, super powerful. Whenever an ally is attacked, has a 100% chance of completely blocking one hit, decreasing the incoming damage to 0. This champion will receive the damage instead. So basically, whenever you hit, you can't hit another champion, you have to go through him first. So that means you have to bring AoE damage dealers into the fight. Ultimate Death Knight also has lots of ways to survive. He increases his stats. He also gains healing. He has shields as well, continuous heals, and then he can place fear and provoke as well. Very nasty champion. He has ways to solo some content if you gear him out properly to do so. And in the arena, he's absolute menace against single target only champions. So basically, damage dealers that can only deal single target hits. Ultimate Death Knight really gives them a lot of trouble. Now, I think when he was first kind of announced, people were not too certain how good he would be, so people weren't super receptive of him. But after a while, they just figured out, wow, this guy's kid's actually really strong. He comes with good base stats too. And as an early game champion, he's actually a huge wall, especially for areas like Spider. For Spider content, the Spiderlings have to go through him first before your team gets hit. So he really gives your team a lot of time, especially in the early Spider stages when you're trying to push through. For example, for the Arbiter missions, right? And then in the ultra late game, this guy's a huge defensive wall. And can be a checkmate pick in live arena as well. So I think overall, this guy's going to be really strong for all accounts from early to end and still find some uses for a lot of different people. Personally speaking, I love this guy. I have one built and I do use him somewhat regularly, less so nowadays in arena, but up until most recently, he was getting used quite a bit. So I'm going to put him in the S tier along with Ninja. He's not going to be universally as good as Ninja because Ninja can actually contribute quite a bit and push your account quite a bit in a lot of boss content, which I think is more important for most players. But UDK does a lot, great champion overall. So UDK was released in 2022, and then there was a bit of a lull up until summer or May of 2023, and then we have Artac. So Artac is a very good champion. Only until recently has he kind of been maybe losing his shine a little bit, maybe. Really good champion here. Good base stats overall. I mean, he has boosted crit damage as well. Supposed to be, I guess, a damage dealer, but his main damage will come from his HP burn. So he has HP burn. He can place it here with his A3, right? He can place an AoE HP burn, which is really nice. And then his A2 here will activate the HP burn. So he can do lots and lots of damage just with the HP burn. And his A1 extends the HP burn. So he has a lot of things going on here that makes it very synergistic, his kit. And his passive here doesn't really help too much. It's kind of a weird thing where he gets more stats the more max HP he has destroyed, and then he can gain it back. It's kind of a weird thing, but he doesn't really need these additional stats. He just needs the HP burn, he just needs the accuracy to land it, and then he needs to just detonate it himself, which is really good. So lots of areas can be really good, especially when you're starting off early on. You don't necessarily have the right champions to go through some content, for example. So having an HP burner right away is just a kind of an easy way to get some additional damage against bosses, go through some dungeons, without having to build him out with 100% crit rate, with crit damage and all that stuff. You can even build Artac to be your campaign farmer because he does bring basically 3 AoEs in his whole kit. He's a one-shot answer to Ice Golem hard as well, since Ice Golem does not take poison damage in the hard mode. He takes HP burn damage, and Artac's really good to deal with the Ice Golem in that stage. Artac can actually help out in Hydra as well. AoE HP burn is definitely still useful. It does bring decreased attack as well to deal with the Hydras a little bit. Overall, still very, very good champion. Still would be very useful nowadays as well. At the very least, it gives you an answer to Ice Golem hard if you have this guy. And Artac is still available in the Shard collection. So some of these champions are still available. For example, Ultimate Death Knight, Artac, Deliana is still available in the Shard pool. Time limited ones would be like Ninja, Alexander. They're not available anymore, unfortunately. So some of these champions will still be available in the Shard pool. But for this, Artac, I think, is still an S tier champion. I would put him slightly below the UDK just because of Artac's ultimate end game use. Just not there, right? His ultimate end game use is just not really there. But he's a great progression champion, great early game champion, and all that. So after that, we have our next champion down the line here, and he was also released in 2023. This is at the end of the summer, and it's going to be Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong coming from the Skinwalkers here. Honestly, this guy is one of my favorite free champions. He's absolutely amazing. I still use my Sun Wukong quite a bit. And yeah, he's one of my main damage dealers. He brings the big speed aura in arenas, very important. He's got almost 1600 base attack, which is very good. Good base speed with the boosted crit damage as well. His A1, chance to stun, very, very solid ability. His A2, big cannon here, ignore 50% of the target's defense on a 3-turn cooldown. Big splash damage here as well. If you can get it off, kill a low health enemy, it's just going to splash all that damage and kill the rest of the team. And then he has a very reasonable 3-turn cooldown, AoE strip, with the block buff landing as well. And his passive makes him insane. Basically, he'll come back every 3 turns at full health, full turn meter if he's dead. So really strong package champion here. He was a free champion. I believe he's still available via a promo code when you start the game brand new as a brand new player. So I would honestly, I default to going to Sun Wukong as a brand new player because he has such longevity in this game. He's good everywhere. In the early game, you don't necessarily need to book him out, and he's still very good. Both his abilities are on a 4-turn cooldown with no books. They don't require books to use the debuff stuff on him. So he can turn stuff into sheep without any books. He can strip guys. He can place the block buffs 100% without any books, which makes it really, really good. So he's very usable even as a brand new player. And he brings the big speed in arena, and sometimes that's just really, really useful. And because you don't have to worry about him surviving, you can just build him full out damage, right? So that's another good thing for early game players. You don't necessarily need to worry about balancing his stats because he's just going to come back anyway. So you just go full nuke on him, or if you're going to use him as a debuffer, use him with accuracy instead. It's a very interesting kind of champion because he doesn't really do too much against bosses, but he can do a lot, especially in the super end game when you have really, really good gear. And if you have a high blessing on him, you can definitely slap a brimstone on him, and then he can definitely help you there for the bosses a little bit. I really like him as an overall champion, but I think Ninja is still going to be slightly ahead of Sun Wukong here in terms of the overall usefulness. Wukong a little bit better for PvP, and of course Ninja's much better for PvE content. Gonna give Ninja the small edge here over Sun Wukong. All right, up next after Sun Wukong is Rhonda. Rhonda coming in November. She's a pretty old champion now too. Obviously she was time exclusive, so no more Rhonda for any of you guys. She's from the Bannerlord, sorry, my bad. But there she is. Magic affinity damage dealing champion. She's a good base attack, 101 base speed with the boosted crit damage. That's good. Attack base damage dealer. Now, the best thing about her in her whole kit that we found was basically this what is this block passive ability, and then of course this block active ability is very good too. But both of these abilities are really strong on a 3-turn cooldown, and it cannot be resisted. Now this really shuts down a lot of really strong champions. Back in the day, even today, there's obviously insane champions with insane passive abilities. So if you have the ability to shut that down irresistibly, it's obviously going to be very good. So this is one of her best use cases, but this is one of the situations where she's just going to be really useful for a very small percentage of people, I think, because this is a high skill ability in a very kind of specific use case. But that's one of her best uses. Also, the other thing that she's actually really good in is that she brings a lot of multi-hits. Her A1 brings triple hits, A2 triple hits, and then she has a double hit AoE on her A2, but her passive is really good at just adding additional hits as well. So she has a 15% chance of joining ally attack with her A1 whenever your teammates attack. This is really helpful to bring down, for example, the Fire Knight shield. She does show up in some Cintranos levels as well for the hard Fire Knight section, so she's very useful there if you have her there. And obviously there's other areas where multi-hits are going to be really good. Her general multipliers are not really insane. She brings other utility, obviously. She can't have insane multipliers if she's hitting you so often, but she's definitely not bad. She's definitely not bad. She's definitely a decent damage dealer and all that, and she has a very endgame specific use case. And this is actually very unique because there's not too many champions with this block passive skills, and let alone having it be irresistible. And that means she doesn't need to feel accuracy in her kit to have this stuff land, which is amazing. Overall, still pretty good champion, but I wouldn't say she's like top tier for anything. And personally speaking, I only really use her for faction wars and some Cintranos levels. So for me, she's not going to be like super endgame usable, but I think as you get her, like as you're progressing through your account, she would have been pretty good for you guys. I'm going to put her in the A tier, and she's going to start off there for us. And then we'll move on to our next champion, which is going to be Rathalos Blademaster here. He's also part of the Bannerlords here. So Rathalos Blademaster is part of the Monster Hunter collab. This was at the beginning of 2024. So almost 2 years ago, Rathalos came into the picture and is one of the bigger, the bigger things in Raid, right? Where we had a big cross IP, collab. And this was a long collab, multi-month collab, right? So it was really interesting to see and how it went. Hopefully it went well. Obviously it did because they did more collabs. But we have Rathalos here. He's actually a decent champion overall. He's got an A1, a decreased defense, which is really good against the clan boss, for example. He has an A2, single target hit here. Every second use of this skill in a round will attack all enemies instead. Ignores a bit of defense, and if it's a boss, ignore 100% of the defense. So he's basically like, made to be a boss killer, but I would say he's not necessarily that easy to use because of this, these turn conditions. He has an AoE here, and then he self-buffs himself on a 3-turn cooldown. Here is the conditions here. So on his passive, he inflicts 50% more damage under HP burn, receives 25% less damage from enemies under HP burn. Every 5th skill used by this champion deals 200% more damage. So this is the big one, right? When you have every 5th skill by this champion deals 200% more damage, you pair that up with this big A2 100% ignore target defense, it's going to do a lot of damage. And he can do a lot of damage against like bosses, for example, right? So that's the thing. But to get this to work, perfectly, I don't necessarily think it's that easy to do. And obviously his A3 is really important because it does give him a little bit of damage. I've seen some people basically turn off this ability and just go A1, A2, A1, A2. So you get more opportunity to get this, I think. But considering that the damage is a bit situational, a little bit conditional as well, I wouldn't necessarily make him like, a premiered boss killer. Although I've seen some crazy numbers with him, definitely. And I have used him a little bit Like for example, like Relentless set actually works pretty good on him if you can get the extra attacks off. It can get you, more fifth hits. More fifth hits means more damage, which is really good. And the other issue I find with Rathalos is that you need to gear him up with good gear. So if you don't have good gear on him, he's not going to do a lot of damage, regardless, right? So you need some good gear on him, which might be a problem for new players when they were first starting out and getting him. So personally speaking, I don't really see him being like the top in terms of the overall conversation for the best overall champions. But I think he's definitely useful, especially the A1 decreased defense and then the self buffing, which is really nice. And then obviously the big slam here can be very good. So I'm going to put him somewhere around the A tier, probably behind Rhonda. Still a useful and good champion overall. So moving on to our next champion here, we have Adelyn. Adelyn came in April of 2024. So basically right after the Monster Hunter collab, Adelyn came into the picture, and she's also a Bannerlord as well. She got a lot of flack after Rathalos came because Rathalos was actually, a solid champion. Not crazy, but solid. And then when Adelyn came, everyone was like kind of saying like she's like the worst champion. She's like, dumpster fire and all that stuff. It's pretty funny, right? It's pretty funny. But up until this point, we got some pretty good champions, right? We got some pretty good 7-day champions, and then suddenly Adelyn came. So why is Adelyn so bad or considered so bad? So her A1 here, it's a chance to transfer debuff. That's pretty bad. Her A2 on a 3-turn cooldown, it's just a heal, heals everybody, heals max HP damage. Pretty bad. And then her A3. This is the move that probably could save her a little bit. She places Asleep, right, on a single target. And then she places decreased speed and decreased attack. And then this debuff placed by the skill will ignore block debuffs on a 3-turn cooldown. Now, this ability is basically what she's being like promoted as. Clarion was saying that we needed an answer to deal with Sand Devil. And Adelyn was that answer that they cooked up. The problem here is that she is Force Affinity, so Force Affinity still will have some issues against some of the Sand Devil affinities. The other thing is you need books. You need books into her to get this up to 100%, and that's that's going to be a thing, right? You need that 100%, and then she might be able to eat some books in her other skills too, which is another big problem, right? So that was a big problem with her. Her kit just doesn't really bring much. She got an A1 nothing. She's got an A2 heal, which is supposed to help with Sand Devil. And then she got an A3 here that is a single target sleep. Like it's kind of a nothing. Her passive here allows everybody on your team to deal a little bit more damage based on the number of debuffs that she places. She can place 3. She can do 3. And I guess with this transfer debuff, it could be something. Accuracy in all battles does help some newer players. But generally speaking, for a new player to pick this up and start the game with, it's pretty bad. Because she doesn't help you in like campaigns, she doesn't help you against bosses outside Sand Devil. Most bosses can't be slept, for example. So she's just not super useful. The other thing that was really good about her, that maybe her saving grace, was that you got a 5-star blessing for her. And I believe this is the first time where they started giving away the blessings for the login champions. So they made up for her really bad kit by giving her a 5-star blessing. The 5-star blessing gives her access to high level brimstone, which allows new players to basically do damage against bosses. A lot of damage against bosses just with the brimstone. So that was kind of her saving grace. Outside of that, she's just not very good. You could use her nowadays maybe in the end game as a sleep champion, but there are some epic champions that can do this as well. But if you rely on the decreased speed, maybe that's useful for you. So I would say, personally speaking, she's a vault champion for me, but I put her a little bit higher than Alexander, just because her kit is somewhat unique, but still it's not particularly interesting or great. And definitely not one that you really want to spend legendary books on just to get 100% on this for a chance to sleep. So personally speaking, I'd say she's still vault, but if you got the 5-star brimstone on her, then she might be like a C tier champion. I think for the purposes of this, we're not going to include her with the brimstone just because we haven't given anybody else a 5-star blessing as well, so we're not going to give it to her here. All right, the next champion on this list, around summertime for 2024, we got a new login champion. That's going to be Loki the Deceiver. Loki's an interesting champion. He's a support champion, and he brings one of the new instances of this evade debuff, or evade ability. It's a pretty cool ability. It basically just dodges the move, which can be really, really strong. Now, he has this ability in his kit, which is really cool. He has a steal ability on his A3, stealing turn meter as well, and then a plus attack for your team. You could use him as a kind of turn meter boost, like kind of like a fake Arbiter almost, because you can steal turn meter, boost turn meter for your team, and then give plus attack. So it's kind of like Arbiter-ish. He also has this kind of conditional ability where it could be offensive or defensive. And then he has an A1 here, which is an AoE, which is good. So you can give him some additional, benefits this way with an AoE A1, like for example, like a stun set or something. But generally speaking, he's just not particularly good. I haven't found lots of use for this guy. He did come with the same treatment as Adelyn, where he came with the 5-star blessing, and that really gave him a lot more use, obviously for Brimstone, and then extra stat requirements and all that stuff definitely helps. But I haven't really seen him yet used too much. I'd say his kit is a little bit on the unique side because of the evade. He does bring some debuff spreading as well, and then debuff extensions. I'm not too sure. Personally speaking, I haven't really used this guy outside of the test server stuff. And from what I've seen, he hasn't really shown that he can be particularly useful for most people. I would say he's probably in the vault, but he's probably going to be higher up in the vault just because he does have a little bit of uniqueness to his kit. So moving on to our next champion here, and this guy was in the winter of 2024, so one of the more recent ones. Yeah, he's going to be from the Night Revenants, and it's going to be Skeletor. Skeletor here from the He-Man collab. He is He-Man's arch nemesis. HP based support. Well, actually, he's just support, but he has good HP. 103 base speed here. He's got an A1 double hit. Chance to increase duration on random debuff. Loki's is better, right? Loki's got an AoE chance to increase duration, although on a lower percentage for Loki, but it's still an AoE, still better than a double hit here. It's got an A2 here, single target hits, 3-turn cooldown. He has a chance to place petrification on a target for 1 turn. If it's a boss, places decreased attack, decreased speed. Now this is actually kind of interesting because if you land decreased attack, decreased speed on a boss that you can really benefit from, it's actually not too bad, right? Petrification can be useful for like arena. You can really shut down like a really tough enemy, for example. Especially if they don't have block debuffs. When the petrification debuff expires, the enemy has a 50% chance, 75% chance when fully booked, placing a decreased speed on that for 1 turn. Now this is a little bit of a weaker situation here, but it's still nice to have. On a 3-turn cooldown, honestly, this is super weak. Single target, right? Single target decrease attack, decrease speed. Super weak ability, but it does bring some use here and there. His A3 here on a 3-turn cooldown, increase accuracy on everybody, steals any block debuffs, and 1 random buff from each enemy. So it's a little bit of a stripped steal here, but not really. And then a turn meter pushback. This ability is not terrible, but it's needlessly complex, I think. But taking away the block debuffs kind of sets up the A2 here for the petrification, so I can see why they kind of did that. It specifically targets the block debuffs first, and then it steals another random buff. His passive here, whenever this champion attempts to place a debuff, steal buff, decrease turn meter, increase duration of debuff, increases champion's accuracy by 20. Sure, that's okay. Whenever this champion is hit, places a 40% chance to place a decreased resistance. So it just makes his accuracy requirement a little bit easier. His passive overall, honestly, not too good. I mean, not too good of a champion. I've seen some use for him against maybe like Chimera, decreased attack, decreased speed, but that's basically all he's doing. Increased accuracy could be useful for Chimera as well. And then, of course, the increased duration of the random buffs could be useful for Chimera. Petrification could be useful for Arena. And then, of course, the buff steal could be useful for Arena. But honestly, this guy's probably a vault champion. I'm going to put him somewhere around Loki and Adelyn. I think he's okay. Maybe can come out of the vault sometimes, but honestly, he's a legendary champion. 2 for 5, like 9, 13 books. I don't know. It's just kind of not worth the books just for decreased speed and decreased attack. So for me, overall, against the rest of the champion pool, I would say definitely belongs in the vault tier. But of course, for any kind of new player or progressing player, you could definitely find probably some use for him somewhere. All right, so after that winter, we got New Year 2025 January, and we got a hell of a champion here. Alice the Wanderer. She's a hell of a champion, very good. When she was released, we were like, what, really? And yeah, the big thing about her, A2, 3-turn cooldown. She has a chance, it's an AoE attack, and then she has a chance to lock out enemies for 2 turns. So she's a damage dealing champion with the lockout ability, and she has a chance to push back the turn meter. by 15%, up to 30% here. It's a really good ability. This is a really good ability on a damage dealing champion that is a free champion. She's absolutely nuts in that regard, right? An A1 double hit here has a chance to decrease the duration of a random buff on the target. And then her A3 is a big single target smack with the ignore defense here, which can trigger a extra attack if she kills somebody. So that's really nice just to pick off like multi enemies. Her passive here, passive effect. Whenever this champion attacks, inflict 3% more damage to each target for each turn remaining on all the skills for all the skills cooldowns. Now this is really good because it's just a passive effect. So she just gets a damage boost based on the amount of cooldown turns they have on their in their kits. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she has to put them on cooldown. It just means like when they use a move and their skill is on cooldown. So that's really good. And she has an active effect here on a 3-turn cooldown where she can reset one of her skills when she kills an enemy. So generally pretty cohesive kit here, right? She benefits from cooldown reduction. She has cooldown reduction herself. She can deal some damage with the ignore defense. She has multi-hits, and then she has a chance to multi-hit here on the A1 as well. Very good champion. She also came with the 5-star blessing as well, which is really good just to help building her out. So right away, she's going to be quite strong. She's mostly a PvP champion. She can definitely help you against some waves, obviously. But yeah, in terms of her overall use, she's very good at what she's used for, basically PvE stuff. But for like bosses and stuff like that, she's not going to have particularly super strong applications anywhere. Of course, with the brimstone, she's going to be a lot better, but outside of that, she's not going to be super great for like bosses. But for PvP, very solid. I think personally speaking, I like her as a generalist kind of champion over somebody like Rhonda, but I don't think she's as versatile as the top S tier champions here. So I'm going to put her in the top of A tier. But I think she's very close. She's very close to the S tier. She's very strong champion here. And yeah, she came in January of 2025, so pretty recent. And with the help of the blessing, definitely very helpful for the stats. All right, so after Alice, we are still sticking with the what are we here? Sacred Order, and then we got Artur, Udex Artur. Yeah, I playtested this guy on the test server, and honestly, I thought he was okay. I think a lot of people were really hating on this guy, but I think he's totally fine. Yeah, he has a 25% speed aura in arena. That's okay. It's not going to be that great. It's not the best, but it's not bad. It's better than 19%, better than 24%, 25%. Got an A1 AoE attack with a bit of a heal. Not particularly insane, but gives him a little bit more flexibility in what to do, what to build. Got an A2 here, increase attack and strengthen on everybody with a turn meter fill on a 3-turn cooldown. I think this ability is pretty decent. It's decent ability. You get the increased attack with the increased turn meter. The strengthen is kind of like a sweetener. If you're attacking, like if you're in an attacking position, you don't really need strengthen. So you much prefer another offensive stat, for example, like crit damage. But increased attack with a turn meter boost on a 3-turn cooldown is very solid. And then he actually brings a revive. It's a single target revive, which kind of sucks. It's on a 4-turn cooldown. And also gives them increased attack when they revive. But he does get the revived ally to do the default skill. It targets the enemy with the lowest HP. So there's a couple, things that you have to look out for. It's not super easy to use. But a couple things to pay attention to, of course. It's not bad, but obviously not as good as somebody like Arur with the team attack and an extra turn and all that stuff. That would have been interesting, right? If you gave Artur like a team revive and then gave him an extra turn, he could go right into this, right? Similar to Arbiter. But instead he goes into the single target revive and then gets an attack right away. That's okay. If an enemy is revived, if the enemy is killed by an ally's default skill after being revived, resets the cooldown of the revive ability. So if he revives someone, kills someone, this gets reset so that he can use it again. I don't think he's that bad. I think he's definitely useful. He's a bit of a reviver for a reviver-ish Sacred Order faction. They do have some revivers and they do have a lot of protection in this kind of faction, so he's not necessarily too useful there. But as a early game champion that you just get, turn meter boost with an increased attack with a arena battle, I would say he's better than Gore Grab, for example, and that's probably where he's kind of positioned in terms of overall strength. But he's not as good as somebody like Arbiter. But with that being said, I still think he's a decent champion, but he's not particularly insane or great. I would put him slightly above Deliana here. I think he's definitely usable. but he's definitely does not make people excited about his kit, that's for sure. But I think he's definitely usable, and he's definitely going to belong somewhere around the average or below average. Actually, I think he's probably average. I'm going to put him in the B tier just to start us off here. I think he's definitely decent. He's average. He's not bad, but yeah, he's not going to be super exciting, that's for sure. All right, so up next we have a barbarian. I can see a bit of a trend here, I think. Actually, she's not barbarian. What am I talking about? She's Sylvan Watcher, sorry. I thought I was seeing a trend where they're just going through the factions and then filling them up with the logins. But we have a Sylvan Watcher, and it's going to be Lemoni. Lemoni came 2025, somewhere around the summertime, around their anniversary event or whatever, the community or after community weeks, I think. But anyways, Lemoni here, she was, she's a damage dealer for Sylvan Watchers. They don't have a lot of damage dealers in their entire faction, so she kind of fit like that specific niche. When she was released, she got a lot of flack being like garbage and all that. She looks amazing, by the way. Single target double hit. This ignore shield stuff is kind of bogus, but it's there. The 3-turn cooldown A2, another single target double hit. Has a chance to remove 2 buffs from target, ignores 50% of their resistance if they're from Corrupted Alliance. This should have just been a flat 50% resistance. Ignore, that would have been nice. The skill deals damage equal to the value of the target's current turn meter, up to 100%. So it can smack. I tested her out in the test server. Her multiplier is actually okay, decent. Not crazy, but not bad. Her A3 here, 3-turn cooldown, AoE, double hit. First hit places shield reduction. Second hit places block buffs. Problem here is that her block buff is only 50% block buff, so it's not that great. But I don't know. They could have gave us 100% block buffs. Why not? Block buffs, heal reduction on a 3-turn cooldown. Like, that would have been great. But instead, it's only 75%. So I think that was the biggest knock against her. But this ability actually hits kind of hard. So that's probably why they probably shut her down. But the heal reduction is actually making a bit of comebacks with Grim Forest. So we saw Lemoni kind of go from Vault, maybe C tier champion, all the way up to probably usable in some areas. So for me, Lemoni definitely fits into the B category as a average champion. I would imagine that even before Grim Forest came in, she probably would have been somewhere around here, maybe above Deliana. But now, definitely a little bit more useful, a little bit more usable. And of course, all these guys benefit from the 5-star souls that they got from their chase events. All right, so after Lemoni, we're coming to the more recent stuff here. So from the Bannerlords here, we got Michelangelo, the orange turtle. This guy. Really, really cool. He's an attack-based damage dealer from the Bannerlords, but he's actually really good in other ways besides doing damage. He does have boosted crit damage here, and he does have a higher base attack than normals, so he can deal some damage. His A1, double hit. He places increased attack on himself, which is great. His A2, 3-turn cooldown, places decreased defense on a single target, and then he places a stun, and then he does the debuff spread. Now, this is really cool because that means that he could potentially take not just the decreased defense, but all the other debuffs from that single target champion and then spread it to everybody. So on 3-turn cooldown, so you can effectively see this as a AoE decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown with a chance to stun one enemy, at least. So it's a very, very strong ability, obviously very good for like early game players. Against bosses, decreased defense is very good. Against waves, the stun is also very good as well. And then self-buffing is really nice. And then his A3 here on a 4-turn cooldown is another AoE, bringing decreased attack and leech. Again, we mentioned leech, very important for the early game against bosses, very, very good. He does ignore a bunch of resistance as well, so you don't necessarily need some crazy accuracy on him. He also places taunt on himself. Taunt's going to be really good at just protecting the rest of your team. Going to be really annoying in arena settings, for example. His passive is also really good. Passive effect has a chance to evade, 15% chance to evade. Very, very strong ability here. If he has taunt, it increases to 30%. Super annoying here. Like I said, in arena, it's super annoying. And of course, he has the turtle bonuses where he'll join in on the ally attacks, which is great. He also places a shield equal to 300% of his attack for 1 turn when he receives a hit. It is on a 1-turn cooldown, so he's not going to have shields all the time forever, but he does get a little bit of a shield basically all the time, which is really good. And then he has evade abilities as well, which just prolongs the usefulness of all of this. All of this put together is just incredibly good for survivability. He places leech as well, so it's just really good. This guy is actually just really strong in a lot of areas. You can build him for damage, and then he can, take care of waves and stuff like that. You can build him as a debuffer, so he's going to help boost the damage of your entire team. He has leech, decreased attack, which helps your entire team survive. He can tank for your team because he has the shield, he has the evade, he has the taunt. And if you want to use them as like an offensive weapon and you have the turtles, he could be an offensive weapon as well. He also places increased attack on himself. It's just a really good champion. I really like this champion. I do believe he is going to be an S tier champion, but I think he's going to be maybe behind or in front of Artac here, maybe a little bit. I think he's probably slightly behind just because Artac is equally as strong for early game, but Artac does have some super late game applications. Whereas Michelangelo, his only real late game application is with the turtles. So if you don't have all the turtles, he's probably not going to be that useful. Just because these debuffs are going to be less useful as you get on in the game because you can get them in other ways. So he does have taunt and he does have evade, which might give him maybe some future applications. Maybe we'll figure out some cool way to use him in the future. And he did come with a 5-star brimstone as well, so building him out would not be as difficult. But I think he does belong firmly in the S tier of champions here, which brings us to our last champion, and it's going to be the Xenomorph. Which is currently ongoing right now. It's from the Dark Elf faction, which is super weird, but sure, why not Dark Elf Xenomorph here. Now, we did a bunch of showcases on this guy, and this guy is actually insanely good. His main spots are going to be against Dragon, actually, because he lands so many poisons. It actually is just insane. And we showed him in a, basically a regen build where he can just solo the Dragon on a hard 10 with food and all that stuff, basically by himself in a reasonable amount of time, and he just destroys the hard Dragon. His A1 places 3 poisons potentially. He doesn't require accuracy to do this, and he does require 100% crit rate. His A2 is actually really good at just demolishing waves once you start to get this going. Single target stun, and it lands the infest. Also bringing crowd control with the true fear here as well. Cool mechanic here with the infest. Basically, if the enemy dies with the infest debuff and Xenomorph is dead, then the Xenomorph will come back. The Xenomorph's passive also enables more damage to be dealt by the rest of your team since it decreases the defense by up to 20%. This guy is just a poison landing machine. It's just absolutely insane the amount of stuff he can do with the poisons. He actually hits decently hard as well in arena. It's actually cool to see him go off, but poisons aren't going to be a crazy damage dealing mechanic in arena. So his main use case is actually going to be against bosses and some PvE content. Now, what he does is really amazing. So like I said, he is able to farm hard 10, Dragon with 4 food, and that's just with my current gear. I didn't have to go crazy with him or anything, and that's the only champion on my account that can kind of do that. So for me, Xenomorph is definitely a must build for my account because he allows me to basically solo farm hard 10 without having to change any gear or do anything super special on him. I know some other champions maybe can do it as well, but I don't want to change up their builds just for that specific role. So I think Xenomorph works very well there. He's also very good just for beginner players. So if you're just starting the game off and you just have Xenomorph, he's going to be great against lots of boss content, especially with the 5-star soul and all that stuff. Very, very good champion. Now, for arena, I don't think he's going to be particularly that great. He doesn't bring an aura or anything like that. He doesn't have any real survivability. He has to land the infest if he wants to have any kind of survivability in arena. It would have been interesting to see the infest pop out another copy of the Xenomorph. That would have been cool if you had like 2 copies of him to manage. That would have been interesting, but he has to be dead for the infest to actually bring him back, which kind of makes sense, of course. I think it's more of like a gimmick debuff than actual very effective debuff, but it's a cool idea. Overall, really, really strong champion, but I don't think he's going to belong in some of the, in the same category as some of the all-time greats. I'm going to put him just behind Alice because I think Alice is generally a little bit stronger just against waves, against arena, definitely very strong there. And even with just the brimstone, she's going to be very serviceable against early game clan boss and some bosses there as well. But Xenomorph's going to be better against a lot of bosses. And his overall damage output against bosses is going to be quite high. I think they're rather similar in the top of A tier for me. So just going over this overall list here. Now, of course, you guys let me know your opinions in the comments below what you guys think about these overall rankings. But I do think that the champions in the D tier, which is the Vault tier, are basically champions that I've never built myself. But of course, my account has been way more progressed by the time I acquired these champions that they were no longer usable. However, I think the clear one that's actually not very good is Alexander. Now, Alexander, we got him relatively early, sometime in 2021 or 22 or somewhere around there. My account wasn't very old at that time. I still couldn't find a use case for him, or I didn't want to build him, or there's just other champions that did the job better than him. Now, I'm sure if you started the game a lot more recently, champions like Loki, Adelyn, Skeletor definitely are a little bit more useful. They could be average champions or maybe even above average champion for some accounts. But I think those accounts would still greatly or quickly outgrow these champions in terms of overall usefulness. Deliana, I think here as a C tier champion, still some use in some stages in Centranos. I think most people can agree that they have brought out the Deliana to use in a stun set, for example, in some Centranos waves. Artur, I think his general kit is mostly average, definitely kind of useful, kind of like Gore Grab ish, but not quite Arbiter as good, not quite as good as Arbiter in terms of the speed boosting role, but definitely better than Gore Grab. So somewhere around the B tier for me. Lemoni, you know, she was kind of down here, but now she's definitely up here because of her importance for most people in Grim Forest, because she definitely makes the Mimic fight a lot more manageable. You don't need her to be in the team if you have a really good team, like good damage dealers and all that. But if she is on the team in your deck for Grim Forest, she makes the Mimic fights a lot easier. And since there's so many Mimic fights, you know, her prevalence is going to be a lot more noticeable. In terms of the A tier, I think I'm pretty happy with this overall. I didn't use Rathalos all too much. I used Rhonda a little bit more than Rathalos because I think Rathalos' application will be mostly against Hydra. And then after a certain point, his damage is not going to match up against some of the other stronger damage dealers, but he's very good for entry-level Hydra. Rhonda, I think she's still relevant in some areas because of her very cool ability with the block passive skill. Irresistible, of course. Xenomorph, I think he fits in pretty well on the A tier. Being a poison specialist, he's very good at that, but he doesn't really bring too much more else, especially after you progress through into the late and end game. Alice, very good champion, can be useful actually all the way up until the late game, I would say. She's a good damage dealer, she has lockout abilities, and she can pitch in a little bit of damage. Now, the S tier champions here are a bit interesting. I would like to hear your opinions on this. So we got Michelangelo here. He's kind of like a generalist champion. He brings, you know, tanking abilities. He has survivability abilities as well. And he can pitch in a bit of damage. Like naturally, you can build him out to do damage. And of course, he's going to be part of the turtle teams, which can do a lot of offensive damage together. We have Artac here. He's generally a very good champion. AoEs all around. Can apply HP burn, ignite his HP burn, good against Ice Golem, and that's one of the hardest dungeons if you don't have any champions to do that. UDK, very powerful champion. I think he fits in there very well. Good for PvE, good for PvP. Actually was meta changing for PvP for a little bit there. And then at least for me, the two champions that I think are the bona fide 1-2 for the S tier is going to be Ninja and Sun Wukong. I think Ninja's going to get a slight edge here. Unfortunately, Ninja never got his, blessing, free blessing there, but if he did, it would be absolutely insane. Same thing with Sun Wukong. They never got the blessings, but even without them, I would say they're still top tier. Both of them have different applications. One's more for PvE and one's more for PvP. But both of them are extremely good in what they do and extremely flexible, even if you're just starting off with them or if you're in the end game building them out to max them out. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. So this is the list for 2025. Of all the 7-day login champions that we've gotten so far in raid. So obviously we've gotten some really good champions. See, most of the champions are in the A or S tier, and then very few of the champions are actually below average or vault. So I would say for the most part, Plarium has given us quite a bit of nice champions over the years. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. What are your experiences with some of these champions? Unfortunately, some of these champions are no longer available in the game, which really sucks. Main one being Ninja. But a lot of them are still available in the game. So you guys let me know what your experiences are. Let me know if the tier list looks wacky anywhere. What would you change? What do you agree with? Let me know in the comment. If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. I would really appreciate that. Thanks for watching until the end. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.